Welcome to I'd Podcast That.
So today we have Todd DeVoe on I'd Podcast That. I'd like to introduce Todd as being a longtime friend. I've mentioned before, 20 plus years. And in addition to that, we're in the Brotherhood of the Green Side of the Marine Corps, him having been a Navy corpsman and me obviously serving in the Corps itself. So we have a lot of common interests, common experiences, and I consider Todd a brother. So welcome to the show, Todd.
Hey, man, it's my pleasure.
So I wanted to bring you on here. You're actually my second guest. However, I've been working with you on EM Weekly since its conception. And why don't you share the story of how EM Weekly got started with the listeners?
Sure. That's one of the questions that people ask a lot of how did you get started in doing the podcast? And it's simple. I teach. I went from teaching a classroom class to an online class, and I really thought that I lost a lot of the interaction that I had with my students. And so I started kind of playing around with bringing guests into the classroom by recording people's conversations like on like a little audio recorder, your handheld recorder. And it wasn't that great, and I just never really used it. And then Brian and I started conversing about this, and just if you guys have been listening to the podcast, you'd realize that he's a pretty techie guy. During the conversation, he goes, well, why don't you, start recording and bringing it in as a podcast? And oddly enough, in the new system that we went to, we had a podcast button, and you could bring podcasts in, or you could record like little vignettes and things like this to put onto your classroom to make it more interactive, I suppose. And this was about December of 2016, and having this conversation about doing this and kind of doing it right. And Brian's been tooling around with playing with podcast type stuff. And so after a few conversations, kind of spinning it up, thinking about it, I decided, along with Brian, to jump into recording podcasts and not just doing it for the students, but bringing it to the emergency management world as a whole. And I really thought that I was going to have, 10, 15 listeners maybe, and then I'd just use it for my classroom. And lo and behold, it became pretty successful in its own right. It really came to play when I went to the International Association of Emergency Managers conference in Long Beach, when people started coming up to me and saying, hey, I listened to your show, and I'm getting a lot out of it. And that was when I kind of looked and said, wow, this is actually a successful show. So that's kind of
I want to jump in here real quick because I'm watching now. Todd and I go way back. We met running rescue ambulance. We realized each other were vets. We've got this brother type relationship where, if we worked or lived near each other, we'd probably be on the front lawn wrestling half the time. Because I'm kind of childish. But so I'm watching people walk up and they're like vying for his attention because we are at a convention and we're conversing constantly. And they finally get their opportunity to talk to Todd. And the first things out of their mouth is, I listened to your show. And I'm watching his head swell. And I can physically see Todd's grape getting bigger and bigger. And it was, cool to see that, because the emergency management community, in my opinion, is underserved. I think that this community clicks off. They're concerned with their immediate surrounding cities, the county, a neighboring county, if it's close enough to impact. But then on the flip side of that coin, it's a community that communicates really, really well, because communication is such a big part of emergency management. What do you think, Todd?
Oh, yeah. And realistically, emergency management, as much as you're saying, it's everybody's worried about their corner of the world, which is true, because, at the end of the day, that's what they get paid to do. But they're very collaborative in nature. I think people who go into emergency management, it's not about taking credit for things. It's not about this is my football and I'm going home. You ask questions and you ask for help, and it's going to come. There's a listserv that I belong to. It's called DREW. It's Disaster Resilient Universities, and it's out of University of Oregon runs it. And on there, you ask one question, like, hey, do you have a plan for stadiums? And you'll have 100 answers with plans in the, to link to, so you can start someplace instead of starting at a white page. And they'll ask, learning best practices for people who learn the hard way, and so you don't make those same mistakes. And so I think it's, in general, we're pretty collaborative. And I think that's part of the success for EM Weekly, is that people want to learn from others and people want to share. And so much so that I was able to get some, for lack of a better term, rock stars in emergency management on the show fairly easy just by asking to come on. And that was sort of my hang up at first, trying to get guests on the show. Who's going to come to this unknown podcast? Who's going to come and big name wise, and come on this show and talk to this guy who they don't know? And it's weird. You ask, and they came. And then I got authors to come on the show, big authors, not Todd DeVoe, who wrote a book, and has it self-published. Talking, guys who've written 4 or 5 books and, been on New York Times bestseller list, and had directors of documentaries come on the show, and it's great. And you just ask, and they come and talk about what they're doing. And my only rule on that is it has to have a nexus to emergency management. So I'm not going to bring on, an author of The Christmas Story just because I think it's a good book. I'm going to bring an author on that specifically talks about things that we're doing in emergency management. And it doesn't have to be true stories. We have a fictional author that came on that his book is really big in emergency management circles because he kind of gets it. It's about an EMP strike.
Please drop the title and author name.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's called 1 Second After by William Forsham. He came on the show. Great book. If you like that type of stuff, it's a really, you don't have to be an emergency manager to enjoy it. If you like action books, it's a good book.
I'm a guy that doesn't like fiction at all, and I always say read, and I'll be honest, I listened to via Audible all of his books, and they're great stories. So yes, you do not have to be an EM to dig what he's writing. So what was a few of the challenges you had when you were first getting started with podcasting?
Me, to be honest, my nervousness of being on a recording. I didn't have the confidence. I wasn't sure. I mean, I had the confidence to speak in front of thousands of people, literally. I've done it. For something to be behind a microphone and talk to somebody on the phone or recording my voice, I suppose, was different. So that was really my first hurdle, was to get over the mic fright, I guess. And then just some of the technical stuff, working through what it is to record your voice and then to make it so it sounds good, and then make it so it goes up into the cloud, into the server who's hosting our show, and then getting people to listen, and then transcriptions. still a problem for me, is transcriptions. I just, it's one of those things I keep struggling with, and we have different solutions to it, but it comes down to you need to just really read them and edit them yourself and go through. I mean, I don't think there's an easy way around that problem. Realistically, getting the word out. It's not just you build it and they'll come. I mean, there's some marketing you have to do, and your self-promotion. And it sounds funny, and Brian was teasing me about having a big head earlier, and I don't. I don't do self-promotion very well, and that's one of the issues, too, is I don't like to talk about myself. I'd rather talk about the guests. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love having guests on the show, because I can talk about them and what they've done, and it's not about Todd. It's about learning from the guests I think those are kind of like the big hurdles I have. One of the things too, I mean, obviously the transcriptions, to be honest with you, has been our area of most complaint, I guess, for lack of a better term. Where we've had people actually email us and say, hey, you suck. You got to fix this. And his friends started doing this. It's not strangers, so it's even more impactful. So for people to call, we actually, and this is kind of embarrassing, I want to go back a little bit. We actually had a guest who is a professor, and like I said, I teach as well, so I'm held to a little bit higher standard by my colleagues. And she basically just said, hey, let me fix this transcript for you. And she fixed her own show, and I was truly embarrassed. And that being said, you got to have thick skin, number one. And then number two, you have to be humble enough to take correction and say, yep, my mistake, my bad, own it. And they'll be forgiving. People will be forgiving. They're not going to hold you and say, oh, you're terrible and never going to listen to you. But they will correct you and take that correction not as a negative, but take it as a growth and a learning experience. That's the way I take it.
Every time we got a complaint, we would change course a little bit to try to make it better, to try to create a better product. And that didn't quite work. So we'd change, let's turn right a little bit here. And that didn't quite work. And we finally come to the conclusion that whoever is recording the show, in this case, I am going to transcribe this show. And Todd is going to transcribe, or I shouldn't say transcribe, review the transcriptions and make corrections before the transcription goes to publish.
I'm reading a book right now by James Clear, and it's called Atomic Habits. And I found him from another podcast, and I guess he had his own, I guess he still has his own podcast as well. But Atomic Habits is a really interesting book about habits, right? And the reason why he calls it Atomic Habits is it's for a couple things. One is making minute, small changes in your day, right? So large changes are easier to do. And then also the fact that the atomic or the atom is also the most powerful thing that could come around if you think about the atom bomb, right? So he talks about this this concept of 1% better each day, or 1% better every time that you do something, as far as like maybe the podcast, or always growing. And taking that idea here, and Brian has also said this also, is always growing, always changing, always being better. And sometimes you go, oh, what's that mean? What is that? How does it be better? And in our case, with the transcriptions, it was, instead of just taking what we thought was a human doing our transcriptions and just posting them, then we started reviewing them. And then we went from there to, okay, let's you do it ourselves completely and using a transcription service, and then using that. And then now, instead of just taking that for face value, going over and reviewing those again. And does it take a little bit more time than just posting it? It does. But that will also save you, though, from that embarrassment of spelling somebody's name wrong or saying lark instead of lart, things like that. I think it's worth it. So taking that 1% better every single time you do something, and eventually, I don't think you'll ever get the perfect, but you'll get to better. And being a better you is what this is all about, right?
The one thing that's been hard for me, because I work at a computer all day, I have 2 monitors up. If I'm doing just mind-numbing work, I have a video playing or audio playing of some sort, whether it be a book or a podcast that I listen to, and I work. And the hardest thing for me to discipline myself to do is to remove distractions when it's time to deal with a podcast. And that's recording a show, that's editing the audio, that's reviewing the transcription. I can't have audible distraction at all. I need to be in a quiet, calm place to do a good job. What do you think?
Oh no, I agree totally. And I have 2 kids and a wife that that are here at the house when I'm doing my recording. And not that, I don't say train them, that sounds terrible, but they understand that when I'm in here doing something that I'm working, that they're not going to come into my office, they're not going to knock on the door, they know I'm in here doing, I tell them though, I said, look, I'm recording, and they know, okay, cool. And when I come out, then I'm done. Yeah, it's important to have your family on board. And if you can't have that, if you can't get to the point to where, you have that, I don't say support, because I'm sure you have the support, but if you can't get a quiet house, if you live in an apartment complex, or if you are a place where you can't get into a quiet zone, go find a place. There's places that studios you can rent for very inexpensive, for a few hours or whatever, and record there. And you can always come back and edit elsewhere, but just find that quiet place to record. And I think that you'll be much happier with the product that you produce.
Definitely. So with EM Weekly, what's been the most satisfying or gratifying thing that you've accomplished with the show?
Wow. That's a deep question, dude. I'm going to have to say that it's the contacts that I've made with the people in the group. We have a Facebook group that you have to be an emergency manager, and we let you in. And people will contact you separately, like PM you, and talk to you about issues and ask you for your opinion. And I think that's, again, it's humbling as far as I'm concerned that people actually reach out and go, hey, what do you think of this? And you go, wow, this is kind of cool. And I think it's those connections and, again, going to the conferences and finding people who know you from the show and that you become, friendly with and friends, if you will, who come over and say, hey, good show or this or whatever, and they feel comfortable to talk to you, and I think that's really kind of cool. And I think that part of it is very satisfying on that part of it. Professionally speaking, oddly enough, because of the show, I actually have received a teaching job at the University of California in Irvine to teach there as well, because the person who listened to the show contacted me and said, we'd love to have you come teach here. And I thought that was really kind of cool.
That's way awesome. And back to the IEM conference in Long Beach a little over a year ago, I finally get Todd away from the masses, and we're sitting down at a 12-top round table. It's lunchtime, and we're eating, the little boxed sandwich lunch. And again, it was a 12-top, and there might have been 5-6 people sitting at it, so there's plenty of room. And this guy walks over, and he says, hey, do you mind if I join you? I'm sure, sit down, have a seat. And we're trying to eat quickly. It's a convention. We want to maximize time on the floor. And he sets his stuff down, and he kind of like looks up, and I'm watching him because he just sat down, and he's like, I listened to your show. I'm like, oh God, here we go. And Todd's like, oh, Todd's very gracious. Oh, that's very cool. Thank you. And I go, so what do you do? And which was the stupid question. You're at an emergency management conference, but that's Brian. And he says, oh, I'm an emergency manager. And Todd jumps in and says, oh, where at? And he goes, Montana. So this guy was the emergency manager for the state of Montana and was excited to sit with Todd because Todd does his podcast. And I look over at Todd and his head gets a little bit bigger. But it was really cool to see those interactions and to see this guy that I've drank beer with. And I mean, Todd and I have done a lot together and for each other. And it was really cool to see this, I can't even call it a transformation, but this light that people are looking at Todd with. And I think it's really cool, man. And you're doing a killer job with the show. The numbers are better and better every year.
Yeah. Hey, what's cool too is we'll just kind of talk about influencing things via the podcast, is that we added pretty early on, I want to say second or third, maybe like the third or fourth show, somewhere down that line, of asking what book that the guest recommends. And because of that, one of our listeners who works for FEMA started the emergency management book list, recommended book list for FEMA. So if you go to the FEMA website, you'll find the book list. And that was started because one of the listeners thought that was a great idea and stole it. And I'm glad he stole it and went with it. And now FEMA has an emergency management recommended book list. So
the federal government's listening to EM Weekly, and every time we recommend a new book, they're adding it to their list. Is that what you're telling me?
Pretty much. pretty darn close to it.
You talked earlier about the rock stars of emergency management, and I'm pretty sure that, and if I'm wrong, listeners, please correct me. Email me, brian@idpodcastthat.com, and correct me, and I will read your correction on the next episode. Can any of the listeners name a rock star in emergency management? And Todd, that question to you. You've had rock stars of emergency management on your show. Who are they? What do they do?
Sure. So the first one, I had Craig Fugate, who was in the Obama administration, the FEMA administrator. And he was the first one I reached out to. And when I say this, when I talk about rock stars of emergency management, what I'm saying is these are the guys who other people reach out to a lot. He's now on one of the newer artificial intelligence agencies that just started up. He is the emergency manager for them globally. And so he travels around the world to help implement and use artificial intelligence in emergency management as Craig Fugate. And then I had this guy named Eric Holder on as well from Seattle, and he was the EM up there for the state of Washington for a very long time, and he's written a grip load of books on emergency management. He's a writer for one of the magazines right now. He teaches a lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff that he creates has been implemented worldwide as well. He was the emergency manager during the World Trade Organization riots that happened in Seattle. I don't know if you guys remember those or not, but it was pretty one of the first large riots that we've had in the country since the 60s. He was the EM for that event. And then I had on the show as well the current administrator, Brock Long. And again, he's the administrator for FEMA. He is the top EM in the nation. Has been on the show. Trying to think a couple others that
you've had quite the list, and I want to go back to getting these people on the show. And I'm a firm believer that people want to help. People don't want to say no, and it's fairly easy once you have contact information for somebody to get them to come on your show. I'm assuming you've sent one email, hey, I'd like you to be on my show, and people said yes. Would that be a true statement?
Yeah, that, and then I use LinkedIn like crazy. And it's amazing how you just, and the messenger say, hey, this is what I do. I'd love to have you on the show. And they say yes.
Now, for a guest that you've had on your show, how many contact attempts did you have to make to finally get somebody to come onto the show? What's worst case scenario?
Most of them are one, like the majority, the vast majority. I haven't had to beg anybody to come on the show. I had a couple of people who said they wanted to be on the show, and then just due to scheduling issues, I couldn't get them on, and that's been an issue. I've had maybe 2 or 3 people that said no, but graciously said no. They weren't like, nah, I don't listen. They were like no's because they were state agency people, and their PIO wouldn't let them through, or their legal wouldn't let them come on, things like that. It is at that point, it is what it is. But no one has ever said, no, I hate you, I'm not coming on your show. It's never been like that.
What's one thing you know now, having 91 episodes under your belt? Am I correct? 91?
Yeah, 91 published episodes.
So knowing what you know now after 91 episodes, what one thing do you wish you would have known day one?
How fun this is. It's a lot of fun. I was so nervous going into it, and I think it made the first say 6 to 10 episodes, really for me, if I go back and listen to them, very clunky. I think just to relax and enjoy the conversation. And that's what it is at the end of the day. It's just a conversation between two people. And I think that if I did that, I think that I would have been much better starting off.
Is there an end in the near future?
No.
You're going to keep rolling?
Yes.
Cool. How many shows do you have recorded but not yet published?
I am recorded into the first month of the second quarter of 2019.
That's awesome. So you're getting them done, canning them, allowing time for a sick week or a vacation, and not having to worry about getting an episode out.
Yes, yeah. And they'll be scheduled here shortly. The cool part about that too is you can move them around. Sometimes you talk about something that's a little bit more pressing, and then you can move things around. So it's not like what you record and they have to be done in that order. So.
Right. What tools or technologies are you using to make life easier?
Well, I keep always upgrading stuff, and I'm a gear junkie anyway. So it's just if you're a gear junkie, and this is the thing that you're into, you're gonna love it. And there's always the next greatest, and I have to remind myself that I can stick with what I have. Let me go back from the beginning. So originally I started recording into Audacity from just a phone line, basically. Skype. I'm sorry. I was using Skype into Audacity. Pamela as well. Those are the software that I used. And then I just didn't like the way it came out. It was always something that was just different about it. It just sounded tinny. Brian and I had a long conversation about trying to fix things. And then I found the Zoom HN6, actually, or H6, I think it is, a big one. I thought that was way too big. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to start smaller. And I went with the Zoom HN4. And that was really cool. The cool part about it, too, is it's compact and it's portable, and you can take it with you and record things and kind of do field interviews and things like this. And I used it at the IEM conference. If you listen to the sounds of IEM, that was all recorded by the handheld HN4. And then microphones, always increasing the microphones. So I use the Audio-Technica microphone, and I think it's a great microphone. And then I use the Yamaha now, the soundboard, the MG10XU, which I'm just now really kind of getting into and learning that. And there's a little bit of a learning curve on it. There's a little bit of an issue, and still trying to figure it out. I think it's the computer, to be honest with you, but of the sound dropping every once in a while, and I've been trying to figure that out. But I don't think it's the Yamaha. I think it's the computer, and I have an older computer, so I'm in the mix of trying to find that. And then I have the HN5 now, handheld as well, and that one, again, is really good quality. I could hook lavalier mics up to that, handheld mics, and it also has a microphone on top of it, and that's a really good handheld as well. And then I also have the Audio-Technica headset, professional headset, that I use, and that's the same one that you'll see news broadcasters use, or like when they're at the holiday parades this holiday, or the sportscasters when they're at the Super Bowl. Those type of headphones with a boom mic on it, and that's what I'm using for my technology right now.
If you met somebody today and they were going to start a podcast, what are 2 pieces of advice you'd give them?
That's another good question. Well, I think one is, like I said before, have fun with it, enjoy it. Don't make it a job. Enjoy that conversation that you're having and learn from people that you're speaking to. Go into that with an open mind when you're interviewing people. If you're not doing an interview show, have fun with the show and pretend that you're talking to somebody in the room, and enjoy that as well. And enjoy the interaction that you're going to have with people and learn from others. I think that's one piece of advice right there. Sounds like a lot, but that's really just one. And then the other one is start simple. You don't have to start with a whole bunch of crazy equipment. I mean, there's stuff out there you can use your smartphone to record on with some inexpensive microphones. You don't have to go all out with all the stuff that we're doing here. I mean, it's been time that I've built up my little arsenal here, obviously. start simple, and once you get once you get used to it, then you can build the next thing and build the next thing. Like I said, I'm a gear junkie anyway, so for me, it's some of it's a want, some of it's a need, some of it's a need and a want. So you don't have to be as big; you can be as small as you want to be, and still have good quality sound. And so that's pretty much it right there.
Have you interviewed your wife yet?
No, I have not interviewed. I interviewed my daughter. She's 5.
Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated.
Awesome, man. Where can people find you and EM Weekly?
Sure, there's a couple different places. For our website to start with, which is www.emweekly.com. And you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, MySpace. I was just joking about MySpace.
And our email address is at AOL.com.
You got mail.
Hey, brother, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some of these tidbits with the listeners of I'd Podcast That. If anybody has questions for Todd, you can find him at Todd, Todd, at emweekly.com.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. Take care, everybody. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate you, brother.